From tone-deaf patches to an inability to listen, I'd like to tell you all about a game that was once thought to be a direct competitor to Fortnite, but is now practically a ghost town known as Realm Royale. We'll start in February of 2018 when the idea for this game came to life. I'm sure many of you have at least heard of Low-Rez Studios, if not their games. They're known for making I meant Paladins and Smite. And in 2018, when Battle Royales were starting to get wildly popular thanks to children, they decided that it was their turn to create their own. They released a separate game mode within Paladins called Battlegrounds. Although in terms of style you can say it already looks similar to Fortnite, it was actually unique in its own ways. Instead of looting for weapons, you'd instead be given the chance to choose from a list of champions and use their weapons right off drop. And you'd only loot for items, abilities, and upgrades, removing most of the RNG when it comes to weapons. Also, whenever you downed a player, they turned into these little chickens that would just scour around. Apparently because they hadn't coded a downed animation just yet, but it ended up being so integral that it just stayed in the game. There was also a crafting system called Forging, where you'd be able to use resources, either collected from chests or from burning items you didn't need, in order to craft golden weapons and armor, which Fortnite and Apex copied later on anyways. There were also horses in the game that you could mount, giving you another way of traversing the game, so you're not spending all your time running around like Usain Bolt, and most of your games won't just die in the storm unless you're actually that dumb. These features came together to craft a game that, at the very least, stood out from the crowd, even if not immensely popular, as it was still sort of tied to the Paladins player base. However, Low-Rez saw the potential of this game mode and decided to shut it down in June of 2018, to release it as its own standalone title, with some slight changes here and there. Instead of champions, you'd select a class, each of which having a specific weapon pool you're allowed to pick up from, perks, and abilities. They also added chicken trophies, which were collected by fully killing players, and could also be used to forge items. But other than that, the game was overall kept pretty much the same. It didn't really need much changing anyways. The game itself was quite intriguing and entertaining in its own way, which is why almost immediately after launch, the game was a massive success, garnering a peak of 100,000 players on Steam and collecting content creators and streamers like they were Infinity Stones.
I smell a lawsuit, man.
This also caused a slight divide within players, with some prematurely digging Fortnite's grave and others trying to bring them back into reality. But it was no doubt that the game was rapidly growing, although without the possibility of surpassing Fortnite, as it was only tied to PC for now. It honestly seemed like nothing would be able to stop them, and yet when you take a look at the game now, it's averaging just 200 to 400 players, with peaks never surpassing 1,000. So what happened? Well, since Realm Royale continued to be labeled a Fortnite clone, Low-Rez decided that they might as well just be one. Their first major patch added hit scan weapons to the game. Before, the weapons were largely projectile based, which, alright, I mean, adding some aiming skill to the mix can't hurt that bad, though it did kind of come at a cost of separating itself from what made it a little more unique than other battle royales out there, considering every battle royale at this point has a hit scan weapon. It's kind of like the standard, but I digress. Anyways, fast forward a little bit and two new patches come out. One removing chicken trophies altogether for some reason, again removing itself from what made it a little more unique, and another toning down forging quite a bit. You are now no longer able to forge golden weapons or armor and abilities, meaning you'd have to go back to just looting like you do in any other battle royale. But again, I digress. Sure, the community wasn't the happiest, but hey, I'm sure Low-Rez knows what they're doing, right? Well, maybe not, because around the end of August, they decided it was best to remove the class system altogether. The biggest, and at this point only, aspect of the game that made it unique and different from the rest was now gone. Why would they even think that was a good idea? Well, their explanation for this change was to more or less simplify the game, stating that locking certain weapons and abilities to certain classes was not the best system. Or in other words, we should just be more like Fortnite. Even though nobody really complained about the class system whatsoever, at this point they might as well just change the name to Fortnite Royale as well. It was no surprise then that from the month of August to September, the average player count dropped from just under 4,000 to 1.5 thousand. Another minor inconvenience that may have played into this as well was the fact that the only game modes available were squads and solos, while other games had an extra duos mode. Not that big of a deal, but to people that want to just play duos, they might as well just play the other games, so they're not having to deal with this.
Now you're trying to make fun of Sasmith, but then you brought up your wins.
But either way, by basically alienating yourself from almost everything that made you unique, you limit yourself to only being seen as yet another battle royale, if not just a Fortnite clone. Think about it. If Fortnite removed building, would anybody have continued to play it? Of course not. People would have gone back to PUBG or something. And you'll never be able to beat others at their own game, so why even try? You'll always fall short, as others are miles ahead at perfecting their own system, so you might as well try to be your own thing. Either way, the player count continued to fall in October to just 1.1 thousand on average, but on November, the average did grow by about another 1,000 players. Why could that be? Well, maybe because they decided to fucking add back classes. They removed the feature just to add it back 2 months later, probably because they saw how many people were leaving or complaining about it. I mean, who is running this thing? Of course, the class system was a little different than before, where you'd still be able to pick up any weapon and ability you'd like, but depending on your class, you'd have a special weapon and the abilities work differently. Basically somewhat the same as before, just without the restrictions. After this, they continued to update the game, thankfully with no horrid patches, as the game went from an alpha to an open beta and released on console as well, helping engage players and bringing in new ones, with Realm Royale peaking at top 10 in the PlayStation Store charts. However, although the player counts were staying steady at around 2,000 to 4,000 average for a good while, around July of 2019, the numbers began to drop once again. And this time, it doesn't seem to have been caused by any particular patch, but instead a lack of patches. The game was mostly abandoned with only 2 real updates in the span of 6 months. It even seems that the microtransaction additions began to outweigh the actual game patches, which obviously isn't a good look. But after the Deviled Eggs update in January of 2020, the game went completely silent, lay dormant, waiting for someone to open its tomb. And in 2022, a small group of developers finally came around to pick it up from the ashes. They released the Reforged update, while also adding Reforged to its title. To put it simply, this patch basically just reverted the game back to what it was during its peak, around when it first came out, while also improving on whatever could be improved without outright ruining the game again. Unfortunately, however, the damage had already been done. Before this update, the game was already averaging less than 1,000 players, and even after its release, it peaked at nearly 4,000 players, with an average finally passing 1,000, even if barely, but quickly fell right back down, with many subsequently leaving either because there were other games at that point that had the same overall core mechanics while also being fun and with a larger player base, or others simply leaving because they didn't have faith in Hi-Res Studios anymore. They couldn't trust that they would actually continue updating the game beyond this instead of abandoning them once more. Regardless, that leaves us to where we are now, averaging barely 200 players with an overall peak of 594 in October. Of course, it's worth it to mention that these are just Steam players, and an accurate number is near impossible to get, as we simply do not have console player charts. Although it was a massive hit when it released on console, we don't know just how many of those players are still playing today. But I doubt it's much better, as after playing the game again myself, I can still see some problems that would push away any new player, or even existing player at that. For one, the lobbies are just full of bots, with only about 10 or so real players in it. Hell, only 15 players were left before the first circle even finished closing in. I know this isn't really up to the devs, but that doesn't change the fact that from the mind of a player, it is quite boring to just have to constantly get into meaningless fights, or just running around until you hopefully find someone, as everyone's already dead by the time you finish dropping. There also seems to be a problem with sound design, as whenever I hear footsteps, I can't for the life of me tell where it's coming from.
The fog sets in.
Honestly, I can't tell if it's me or just the fact that this game's audio system is so ass. I know there's someone down there, I just don't know where. Though that might just be me. Everybody also has a god-awful amount of HP with how many chests there are and just how easy it is to find shields and whatnot. There's also so many fucking chests, holy shit. Like, I'm surprised at how many fucking chests there are, oh my god. Though this is also a problem I have with Apex, so it's not really that big of a deal. Overall though, it's kind of hard to call this game dead, as there is still a small but active community around it, and Hi-Res is still putting out updates, even if not that frequently. However, I would still say the game has been forgotten, as not only has it blipped from the memory of almost everyone that originally played it, myself included, but also because not many more are clearly being introduced to the game either way. I'm not even sure if advertisements for it even exist anywhere nowadays. Though I guess it'd be tough now, considering the popularity of Battle Royale has quieted down significantly, with the only real major ones still being Warzone or, well, the Pits of the Underworld. Anyways, all my socials are in the description, feel free to check them out. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, comment, love me, I don't know. Realm Royale is free, so you can go check it out for yourself if you haven't before, but I'm not sure if you'll find much enjoyment out of it anymore. But again, that's just mostly my opinion. I've been Low Resolution Studios, you've been watching a Fortnite clone, and ciao ciao.